Cool. And I believe we are live. Good evening, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Bashirs. I'm a strategic content director at the Americans for Prosperity Foundation and the executive producer of this award-winning documentary that we're about to watch called A Second Chance. You know, as a community, we believe that, like the quote from Frederick Douglass says, that we should work with anyone to do good and no one to do wrong. And I believe that criminal justice reform is one of those areas where we can really see that beautiful vision come to life. So tonight I have Tyler Voigt here, who is the Deputy State Director of Americans for Prosperity and the Americans for Prosperity Foundation in North Carolina. He and a team of field staff, activists, and allied organizations worked together for several years, and they worked year-round, really, to share knowledge and tools that encourage participants, activists to apply the principles of a free and open society in their daily lives, knowing that this is what leads to the greatest prosperity and well-being for all. Tyler has lots of stories from his years at AFP and AFPF, but tonight we're going to hear about the Second Chance Act and how a broad bipartisan coalition of groups worked together for years to get this impactful law, the Second Chance Act, across the finish line. So without further ado, Tyler, will you give us a quick rundown to tee up the documentary about what the Second Chance Act is and what this documentary is about?
Yeah, absolutely, Elizabeth. So ironically, I had just checked and I saw that a year ago today is when the Second Chance Act finally got unstuck from House rules and finally passed House rules and moved along. And that's when we knew we had a really good chance at it passing. So it's a really important anniversary for us today, for all of us, AFP's small part that we did in this, and the larger coalition in getting this bill passed, this important bill. But what the Second Chance Act does is that it provides some relief for folks who made mistakes in their past. They have something on their record that's preventing them from getting an apartment, from getting a job, that they're still paying for something that they might have done 20, 30 years ago. This allows them to expunge it from their record, nonviolent misdemeanors. It also allows them to have something that might have been dismissed or found not guilty taken off their record automatically. They won't have to worry about that. That's something that's been huge that we've been looking at trying to do in not only North Carolina, but across the country, because a lot of people don't know this will be on their record and it could prevent them, like I said, from getting an apartment, getting a job down the line. It impacts their life. And it's something that once somebody has paid their debt to society, or even if they didn't do anything wrong, they are still living with that. So this documentary, A Second Chance, really kind of tells that story of how we entered this coalition of groups and how we all work together to see this bill pass and to really make these significant changes that people really needed in their life. So, like I said, what it does is it provides relief for folks who might have made a mistake in their past. After a certain amount of time not reoffending, they can get that expunged from their record and they can go on with their life. They can be taxpaying members of society again, full taxpaying members of society, without having to continue to serve that sentence, even though they've paid their debt to society. So I think without further ado, Elizabeth, let's start the documentary.
All right, I'll get it rolling, pop off camera, and it should go live in just a second. Thank you so much, Tyler.
Even though it's been 30 years ago since I left this place, I still have nightmares about it. The green ceiling of the paint that when we used to wake up in the morning time and we would look and see if everything that happened to us, if it was real, and I would open my eyes and I would see this green ceiling and it would remind me that I was in prison. And even now, 30 years later, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and I'll open my eyes and I'll look at the ceiling and then I'll realize that it's not green, you know, that I'm not in prison anymore. And then I can relax after I realize, oh, wait a minute, it's not green, so that means it's white, and that means I'm not in prison. And even though this, like I said, it's been 30 years, I still have nightmares about it.
My name is Lynn Burke. I am an attorney, and I'm also an ex-offender. I went to prison twice in my life. When I was 19, I'm trying to remember, it was in Tennessee for shoplifting. And I violated my probation, and I had to do 6 months there. I managed to get out after the 6 months and went back to Tennessee where my parents were and where my children were. And so then after I left from Tennessee and I moved to North Carolina, my mother passed away, and she was the only person that was really supporting me with my single 4 children that I had by myself. We were living in the projects, and she died. And when she did, I violated my probation because I wasn't able to take care of myself and my children at that time. And within 6 months after that, I was in prison here in North Carolina with a 10-year sentence. My children were with their father, who was he had addiction to cocaine. So my children were with him. And like I said, I was in the prison, and while I was there, which was in June of 1988, I was looking at 10 years, and I didn't know if I should even be alive, because what kind of mother has their children goes to prison twice, has 4 children, and they're home with a drug addicted daddy? And so I just, wanted to die. I thought that I wasn't supposed to be here, and I figured that maybe my kids would be better without me. After 6 months of being in the prison, it was a night before Christmas, Christmas Eve, and I was in the hole at that time because it sounds strange, but I was having a lot of fights with people. Everybody was scared of me a little bit because I just didn't care, and I really just wanted to die. And one of the guards came banging on the cell that I was in, saying, "Come on, you gotta visit." And I was like, "I'm not going no visit." She's like, "Yes, you are. You're gonna go." Because she was a really nice lady, one of the guards. And she's like, "Well, Lynn, would you do it for me?" I remember going, "Oh gosh." I was like, "Okay, I'll go. Okay." So I walked through the prison. So like I said, I was in the hole, right? So literally, it was 7 gates between me and where I had to go to this, to somebody who was visiting me, to the visiting. And I walk in and open the door, and my kids came running to me. And they were all dressed up with their Christmas clothes, and they were running, Mommy, why did you leave us?" And I remember just saying, "Oh my God, you know what?" It was like at that minute that I realized that they needed me, and they didn't have anybody else. And so I had to get myself together. And I told my children, I said, "Look, I'm coming back as soon as I can." So I told my son, Jimmy, I said, "Look," he was 5 at the time, and I said, "Look, I need you to look out for your sisters. I need you to make sure that, if your daddy's, doing something that he shouldn't be doing, you make sure that the window's open in your room so that if anything happens or whatever, you get your sisters out of the house, out of the window. Make sure that everything, that you take care of your sisters, and I'll be there as soon as I can." And I remember Jimmy telling me, "Okay, I'll do my best." And I was like, "I'll be there as soon as I promise I'm coming, I promise." So after when they left, I was walking me back to the hole, and I asked God to give me another chance to take care of my children. And I told God, I swear to God, if He just give me that chance, I would do whatever He told me to do. Within probably another year later, I finally got out. It was me and the kids by ourselves. I got rid of their daddy, and we just started, doing what we had to do to make sure that my children were able to get their lives straight. And I always wanted my children to be able to, dream and be whatever they wanted to. But see, I knew that I couldn't do anything with my life. I kept trying to get a job. I would go to different places and I wouldn't tell them about my background, so I could at least try to get a job for a little while until they realized that I had a criminal record.
In our country, if you end up with a criminal record, it can dog you the rest of your life. We have a very unforgiving system. And we know in our country, as Brian Stevenson says, we have a two-tiered system. It's based on if you're rich and guilty, you'll probably get off. And if you're not, you're probably going to get in trouble and you probably have a criminal record. So it's basically the poor and innocent end up getting a bad situation, becomes worse for them.
We let somebody out of prison, they can't find a job, they can't go back to school, they can't find a house. More than likely, because of prison, they have not been able to keep in touch with their family and keep a support network. And then we expect them to go on and not go back to the gray economy. We expect them to be perfect citizens. And none of us are.
In America, we have 5% of the Earth's population and 25% of the Earth's prisoners. 2 out of 3 people who are released from prison, and 98% will be getting out one day, are back in that jail cell, that prison cell, within 3 years of their release date. That's a business model that doesn't work. And if you find out what happened, they almost always say the same thing. Didn't have affordable housing, didn't have a job, didn't have the drug treatment that left untreated when I went into prison.
Our view at AFP, it generally is, and when you pay your debt to society, you should be welcome back to society.
When I was on the street and I had clear evidence that you committed a crime or whatever, then I arrested based on the evidence. And then it was up to the court systems to decide your guilt and what your sentence to be. And what we find is that sometimes the punishment is harsher than the crime.
I worked in a jail for 2 years and I saw people come in there that it's a revolving door. You would let them out of jail. You would say, hey man, good luck. Here's some resources. Here's a local church that might can help you. Here's some counselors. And that came from the goodness of your heart. The jails didn't ask you to give that stuff out to them. They didn't provide a lot of government assistance, a lot of help to figure out ways to get these people out of this door. And that was one of my big heartstrings that got pulled, was when AFP started working on criminal justice reform, I wanted to be a part of that.
There's barriers to reentry, good housing, a good job, a record that's going to make it very hard to do many of the things that the rest of us take for granted.
Technology is a barrier. Transportation is a barrier. Housing is a barrier. In fact, the barriers are insurmountable. And so with us recognizing as an agency the barriers, those are the things that we try to ensure that we support people in, knowing that it's a barrier. What that looks like in action at Link, the grace, the redemption, the reconciliation, it looks like really, truly, and authentically providing individuals with the support of second chances. We support people And people turn literally their setbacks into comebacks and become these giants in our community.
We had been contacted by people who provided services to folks in the community, who were working with people who were trying to get back on their feet for any number of reasons. And they were saying, we have so many people with criminal records that act as a barrier for all the things we're trying to get them accomplished with, either finding housing, getting trained, and then getting a job. And they go, what can we do about it? Back in 2018, that there were groups that were interested in this. AFP was one of those, Americans Conservative Union. They had networks of other organizations they were working with around the country. We knew that was going on. And so when we came together to just talk about what we were trying to do, it was readily apparent that we were all of the same mind, that we had a criminal justice system that on the back end was failing people.
We were asked to come into North Carolina by different groups, both left and right, good friends of mine on both sides. And we came down, and I think it was starting in 2018 or so, was when they started that movement. But it started longer before that, but we were asked to come down then. And we worked with, like I said, different groups. David Plouffe, who was President Obama's campaign manager for his first campaign, and was working with the Zuckerberg Group on second chances. And David Safavian from ACU, a really good friend of mine, the three of us worked together. And we went down and we just started to talk to legislators. We were working with advocates, and we kept coming back because that's what you have to do.
We're supposed to be the land of the prosperous, the land of the free, the home of the brave. These are people that went out and served their time. They went through probation, parole, they paid all their fines. They don't owe the state anything. All they're wanting is to live their life. So it was something that people across the aisle came across, and everybody worked together. We had organizations like the ACLU, the NAACP, Americans for Prosperity, Conservatives for Criminal Justice Reform. Those are organizations that aren't often linked together. And that was something that everybody held hands, and we marched to Raleigh and told the legislators this is something that had to happen.
North Carolina gave us the opportunity to work with both sides of the political aisle. Organizations across the political spectrum that all put aside their petty differences and focused on criminal justice reform. To be candid, that's how we work. And it's not as though we're giving up our core principles to work with our friends on the left, or that they're giving up their core principles to work with their friends on the right. But what we found is that both sides can look at an issue set and come up with their own way to get something fixed. But we can all agree that there is a problem that needs to be fixed. And it's exactly that type of coalition politics that we found so effective wherever we've been.
I think it surprised the public in some ways. I think it surprised the General Assembly in a lot of ways. And they hadn't seen anything like that, I think, really ever before, where you had such a coming together of not only state groups, but also on a national level, investing in the idea that we ought to be able to get the Second Chance Act passed, and it was worthy of North Carolina doing, and it had all this attention from groups that span the spectrum.
I've worked with Bill for 15 years, and usually we feel like we're trying to just get something. The power of this coalition made it so different for us. It was just it was fun. Once it started rolling, it sailed through the Senate unanimously very quickly, and then it took a year to get to the House, and we were worried. We were worried it wasn't going to happen.
What we were hearing behind the scenes was that there was one county district attorney that just plain didn't like the bill and was convincing his legislator to stand in the way. Ultimately, there was so much pressure applied that I think he relented, and we were just thrilled when the bill passed overwhelmingly in both chambers. That it was incredibly gratifying.
Just within the last hour, Governor Cooper has signed the Second Chance Act into law. Now, this bill sets up people who have been found not guilty or have had charges against them dismissed to have their records expunged.
It's a way of just making sure that when it comes to the criminal justice process, that someone is just not being dogged for the rest of their life with one indiscretion.
At the end of the day, this will help people, help their families, help society, and it's going to really save the citizens of North Carolina a lot of money, because it costs a lot of money for people to be incarcerated, and then when they're on probation, it's all just really costly. And so for people who have done the right things, made mistakes and moved on, we need to be much more about redemption and rehabilitation rather than just retribution.
I think it was a great day when the Second Chances Act passed in North Carolina. I think it made us safer overnight, and I think it did a lot to improve the economic situation of people. People are talking about second chances, community building, reconciliation now like never before. This has been the right thing to do for years. It's time for everybody to come around this issue, wherever they might be in the justice system, wherever they might be as a community leader. We need to all work together to keep our community safe by sincerely engaging in second chances and understand that there are a category of people who do need incarceration, who do need punishment, and unapologetically we're going to continue to do that. But there's also a whole lot more people out there who need a second chance, and we all need forgiveness.
I think, and we think at AFP, that we should give people real second chances, because when you do that, it's the right thing from a moral perspective, it's the right thing from a constitutional perspective as well, and ultimately it's the right thing from a fiscal perspective and a public safety perspective.
Number one, I was excited. And as I started sharing that with our residents, there is the Second Chance Alliance, and then there's a Second Chance Act, and as a result, it is passed, and this is what it's going to look like come December. And when we started sharing what that looks like, man, our residents was like, say that again? Oh man, I'm gonna be able to get some of these barriers out my way so there's freedom. I'm gonna be able to enjoy opportunities that some of the collateral consequences created even with some of my licensure. Oh man, I might be able to be a normal citizen again, or at least people or employees might be able to look at me like a normal citizen again.
Most of these people, they have children, they have family, and you're gonna feed your kids. I work every day to take care of my family, and to have the few things that I have in life, they're the same way. I mean, you want to act like they're a different part of society, that they're non-human. They're as human as we are. They just made some bad decisions.
When I first realized that it was possible that this was going to happen, that they were going to dismiss my stuff, I remember I was driving over there. I live in Nightdale, so I was driving down the street, and I said to myself, wow, I said, man, I could be whatever I want to be. And I just kind of sat there for a few minutes. I was like, if this really happens, I could go be a medical examiner. That's what I always wanted to be. I always thought that'd be cool. So I was like, I could go over there and just file out an application, and I could do that. It was weird. It just hits me for a few minutes, and I was like, it allows you to dream. Like when you're a little kid and everybody says, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then people say, oh, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a doctor, So it makes me kind of feel like, I don't know, maybe I could be a medical examiner. And if I don't, it's my own fault, because I could do it if I wanted to. You know what I'm saying? Like a little kid with a dream. And I used to always say, well, yeah, but no dreams no more, but it is now.
My name is Daquan Peters.
My name is Erica Bailey.
My name is Sharon Green.
I've recently served 12 and a half years in the Federal Bureau of Prison.
Currently charged with robbery and breaking and entering.
Altogether in my lifetime, as far as going back to prison, it's got about 5 years of my life. For me, having a second chance means all flags up, do the right thing, and accomplish my goals, and have everything expunged that was from my past. And don't look back and keep it moving forward. That's what second chance means to me.
Yeah, I made a mistake and I did this and I did that. And even though I'm a felon, it's like I still have a bright future. I can still do things that I wanted to do. And I can show her that even though mommy messed up, she got herself together, not only for her, but for you. So it's a big thing right now in my life to have a second chance and to be able to say I did it even though I was a felon.
Man, it's just so many people to thank for this. Like, I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful. I'm just so thankful, man. I'm thankful to be here because I wasn't supposed to be here. And I just want to thank everybody that played a part in my life up to this point, and the people that's just still continue to be there for me. Thank you.
Great. So I remember walking into a room at the Justice Center by Bill, and this was probably a year and a half ago, probably closer to 2 years ago, and we had decided we were going to get together with a group, all the groups of people who might be interested in coming together and talking about issues like this. And at that time, I think me personally, and probably a lot of the other groups, thought, well, this is cool. This is a left-right thing. This is everybody coming together. But I think even that didn't do us real justice, because we had still put up those barriers in our mind that we weren't on the same page with a lot of the things that we wanted. So getting to know all of these groups and really finding out that their vision for what we want to see for criminal justice reform really is the same as what we're looking for, it's been eye-opening for me. So tonight we have, guys, in addition to this documentary screening, a panel where we're going to talk to some of the people who were involved in getting this law passed, some of the people you saw in the video, and hear from them firsthand about their experiences with this, what it meant to them, and how this came to be. So a couple brief introductions of this. First, we have Bill Rowe. Bill is the General Counsel and Deputy Director of Advocacy at the North Carolina Justice Center, where he has served since its inception in 1996. Justice Center is a research and advocacy organization whose mission is to eliminate poverty in North Carolina by ensuring that every household in the state has access to the resources, services, and fair treatment needed to achieve economic security. So Bill, thank you for joining us. Next, we have Ben David. Ben David is the District Attorney for New Hanover and Pender counties in North Carolina, where he is in his 5th term as DA. Ben is a past president of the NC Conference of District Attorneys and is a founding member of Law Enforcement Leaders to Reduce Crime and Incarceration. Ben, thank you for joining us tonight. Next, we have Greg Glod. Greg is Senior Criminal Justice Policy Fellow with Americans for Prosperity Foundation, formerly the Director of State Initiatives for Criminal Justice with Texas Public Policy Foundation. Greg received his JD from the University of Maryland School of Law, and in 2017 was named Forbes 30 Under 30 list for law and policy. And last but not least, you saw her featured heavily in the video. We have Lynn Burke. Lynn is an attorney and beneficiary of North Carolina's Second Chance Act. She earned her law degree in 2010 and uses it primarily to practice immigration law. Before the Second Chance Act, Lynn's record for more than 30 years ago kept her from being considered for admittance to the North Carolina Bar Association. So thank you, Lynn. Thank you all of our panelists who have joined us tonight to talk through this. We're going to go through some questions that we have for you guys, and then take some questions from the folks who are watching us, whether it be YouTube or wherever. So we're going to start off with Bill. Bill, the Justice Center has worked on legislation and bills like this for years. What was 2020? What was it about 2020 that finally helped get this across the finish line?
Well, I think folks saw on the film what really came together on a national scale and also in the state and across the aisle at the General Assembly, but also for groups that often aren't working together. But I will say that, you know, this was incremental progress, and there had been efforts since probably 2009 with groups like Community Success Initiative, and Dennis Gaddy and Daryl Atkinson, and Lynn was involved then. And it was just getting started to start talking about what are we going to do for people with a criminal record, because that was not in the discussion. And so bills were filed, some things were passed. The first expungement bill was a 15-year wait period for a misdemeanor, one misdemeanor and one felony, passed probably about 2012. Then that changed dramatically in 2017 with folks advocating, where we moved that down to 5 years for misdemeanor and 10 years for felonies, but it still was only one. But it also had the district attorneys, and Ben David is here, and the district attorneys got on board, and that made a big difference. And I think that made a big difference in 2020 as well. So I think that the film does a great job of bringing together a powerful group of people who were like-minded. There was no degree of separation of what we were all working for. And when you have that sort of effort, along with grassroots organizing and the people with criminal records advocating and being at the table and telling their story, all of that came together in a fine way in 2019 and 20. So it was over a long haul, but the stars and the moon all aligned in 2019. No doubt.
Sure. Greg, you work on policy like this. You see this across the country. What have you seen as far as a kind of a landscape changing in 2020? And have you seen stuff like this across the country that's happened like in North Carolina?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the landscape really started changing, much longer than that. I think we saw our first go around with a lot of this criminal justice reform and kind of the narrative shift all the way back in 2007 in Texas. And so Texas was really the first state to show that you could reduce your incarceration rates and to reduce your prison population, and crime was not going to increase. And so long story short, they had a projection that they were going to add an additional 17,000 people to their bed space and prison bed space in Texas. They have one of the largest prison systems in the country. A lot of states, that's their entire prison system, but Texas, that was going to be added additionally at a cost of about $2.5 billion just on a construction cost alone. They said, we can't do this. We cannot continue to build more prisons. They cost way too much. And so they decided to go a different track. They decided to invest in diversions and alternatives to incarceration. They decided to invest in treatment. They decided to look at their parole situation, how they're getting people out of the criminal justice system, and incentivize them to go through treatment and programming through that. And what they actually seen, instead of building new prisons, Texas has actually closed 10 facilities since 2007. The prison population, even with the huge population expansion that Texas has seen since 2007, they've actually seen it by rate and by raw numbers decrease substantially since that time period. And so other states started having these same things like, hey, we have a $2 billion budget tag on building more prisons, or $1 billion budget tag on this. And so Georgia started knocking on the door and saying, hey, what can we do here on this? North Carolina and South Carolina and a lot of other places saying, how can we fix our criminal justice system? Because if, tough on crime, Texas can do it, we surely can as well. And so you really started seeing that narrative shift start in 2007, and then it slowly progressed into a lot of different things, and particularly on reentry. And just kind of looking as a step back on criminal justice, I thought David Safavian said it best in that movie, that no one really undermines their principles or has to, compromise their principles when it comes to criminal justice reform, regardless of where you're coming from it on this, political spectrum. So, if you're looking at it from a faith-based perspective, you can see that, the power of redemption, that all God's creatures are, able to be redeemed and are worthy of value in life, and how the criminal justice system really undermines that principle. If you're looking at it from a public safety and fiscal perspective, you're looking at billions of dollars spent annually on locking people up without this, public safety return, where you see in many jurisdictions 30, 40, 50% of individuals coming back to prison within 3 years of their time being released. That is not safe for our communities, and it's not fiscally responsible for our taxpayers. And then you can look at it from a disparate impact on minority communities and how the criminal justice system really hammers on Black and Hispanic communities more frequently, and the disparate impact there. And so it really touches from the left to the right. Whatever your goals and principles are, you all lead to the same place, that this criminal justice system has been ineffective. When you look at reentry and keeping someone and the collateral consequences that a criminal record continues to have on people, from housing to education, to just being able to be around your children and other things, we continue to punish people over and over again, even when they're off books 10, 20, 30, 40 years down the line. And I don't think, regardless of where you're at, I don't think this is a bipartisan issue. This is just an issue, a human issue at this point. And so it's terrific to see what North Carolina's done, and many other states have followed suit on passing, different record sealing expungement laws across the country. So it's terrific that North Carolina has led, and as other states have followed that projection as well.
Yeah, Greg, you mentioned Texas. We actually have a question in the chat that says, I was convicted of a felony 17 years ago, which I never committed, but was forced to plead guilty to. What about people like me? Do you know if there's anything specific in Texas who could help out that commenter?
So I actually, one of the first things I ever did in criminal justice at the Texas Public Policy Foundation in 2015 was help pass for the first time a bill that would allow for convictions only on the misdemeanor side to actually be sealed or expunged, depending on how the definitions are. So they do not allow for felony convictions as of now to be expunged or sealed in Texas, but that is definitely something that's been pushed, by organizations like ourselves and others across the country on that. And so currently under Texas law, you cannot get a felony sealed or expunged, but things could be changing down the pike as there's been more momentum and they've seen the success of other reforms in the past moving forward. So times could be changing there in Texas for sure.
Great. Thanks, Craig. Lynn, we'll go to you next. We heard part of your story in the documentary. What do you think, how has the Second Chance Act looked for you since it went into effect a few months ago? What does that look like for you?
It's hard to believe. I don't know. I still don't believe it. But it's been an honor, and a lot of people are asking me for help, how to fix the what they can do, and to try to get rid of their criminal records. And it's just I'm just so grateful. I really am. And it's just hard to believe that along 30 years ago that I ever thought that I would ever be able to get to this point. I want to say probably about 2-3 months ago, I went down there to the courthouse in Wake County, and all my stuff was gone. I was like going every couple of weeks to try to pull out my driver record. My criminal record, and something would still be there. Something else would be there, and I would just leave, and I would just kind of make sure nobody knew or was watching me. I just wanted to see if I was a regular person, and like other people that hadn't been in trouble, was I maybe going to be able to go in there and really get something that doesn't say nothing on there. And probably about 3 weeks ago, there was nothing in there, and it's just hard to believe. I keep thinking that it's some kind of I don't know, I can't explain it. But I feel really lucky that I'm able to tell other people that they can dream too, and that they can still want to be whatever they want to be. And I just feel really privileged to be part of this. And I want to thank y'all for letting me be involved.
Well, I'll say, Lynn, the privilege is mine, and I'll speak for the rest of the group, all of ours. Working with you in these last couple of years has been phenomenal, and being able to help share your story has been life-changing, not just to you, but to, like you said, people are coming to you trying to figure out how to get this done for themselves. So it's been life-changing for multiple other people. So it's been fantastic working with you these last few years. I've really, really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yep. We'll go to Ben. Ben next. What would you say to other members of law enforcement community or the legislature who are skeptical about bills or ideas like the Second Chance Act?
So I had people asking me, what are you doing working on the Second Chances Act? And I answered with 2 words, my job. Because my job's to uphold the Constitution. And the Constitution says people are presumed innocent. So if they are found not guilty or we dismiss their charges, that should be off their record, and they shouldn't have to fight to get it off their record. 95% and more who were eligible were never getting that relief because it was expensive to hire a civil attorney to do that. So now those things are automatic. But then there's other folks, people who have paid their debt to society and now are out. The street's an equal opportunity employer. How are we going to get them fully back into society? And we have to understand that what this country was founded on was the idea that there's 3 God-given rights. We talk about life and liberty and the pursuit. And this is about the pursuit of happiness to me. You can reunite family, because you're not allowed to live with your family if they're in public housing, and you have that felt now you can. You need to be able to get a job. You need to go off to college. You need to get those student loans. You need to get those licenses that allow you to do 40% of all jobs in this state. You don't need to have that scarlet letter F for felony or M for misdemeanor hanging around your neck that's going to reduce your future earning potential by 60% over your lifespan after just one nonviolent conviction. So when people ask me what I was doing, I just simply said my job. I'm trying to fight for the people I represent. And that includes people who need forgiveness. And I think that means all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Bill, we'll go over to you on the kind of a related question. You've talked to a lot of legislators. You've talked to a lot of people. You've heard skepticism about the Second Chance Act and a lot of bills like this. What have you heard the most that has kind of surprised you about maybe misconceptions about bills like this?
Well, what has always surprised me, and I don't know if it's about the Second Chance Act or oftentimes working with the General Assembly, and it may be true in legislatures other places, like to hear what Greg says in Texas, how often people don't read the very words that are printed in the bill. And things are said that are just not true about what the bill does. And so that's been, but I think with the Second Chance Act, we were able to overcome that, but there was a lot of misinformation about what the bill would do. I think we still have a lot of work still a lot more work to do. We have celebrated the Second Chance Act, but are also trying to move on because what we also still hear is a real reticence about giving people second chances for a variety of other crimes. Second Chance Act's great, but it's one felony, so we'd like to do more than that. The other problem, and Ben David has touched on it as well, is that there's a real gap between people who are eligible to get an expungement. So we've created a great opportunity for people to get them, but they're not getting it. They're not getting access to it. And so we have to figure out how to bridge that. And I think the dismissed charges is a great example that we ought to be following from other states where automation takes over. And we should not be dependent on, can I find a lawyer and can I figure out how to navigate the court process? So I think people's eyes have been opened up at the General Assembly. I think they're much more sympathetic to expungements than 10 years ago. 10 years ago, where it was a non-starter, really, trying to get something going on expungements. And now it's part of the conversation there. And there's some real leadership going on both sides of the aisle to get things done. So that's probably what surprised me the most, is how we've moved in a very fast way. Although for people who have a record, it's not that fast, to be perfectly honest with you.
I knew I'd forget to unmute at least one time tonight. Greg, kind of the same question, since Bill was looking for an answer from you there, from not just, I guess, Texas and specifically, but across the board. What do you see that are misconceptions about bills like the Second Chance Act in other states, and how do we clear up these misconceptions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the big philosophical difference that we see, other than just people flat out not reading the bill, which is definitely something that happens. That's why coalitions like this are so important, because people don't realize that, like, sometimes just one person comes in, or there's one misconception, or they get one email or something like that, and it really locks into a lot of offices what they think about something, or they'll just hear from one sheriff or one officer or something else. So when you continually are getting that education, because there's so many things moving during the legislative process, and you're getting that information that's accurate from a bunch of different people, a lot of different stakeholders across the country, that's what actually moves legislation. So it's so important to hear from, grassroots or whatever else on this type of thing. So I totally agree with Bill. I think there's just a philosophical difference sometimes, particularly with sealing, that, we heard from business owners or someone else saying, I should know this information, and I understand that. But, at the end of the day, it's a government record, and the government created that. And the government is able to remove that when it no longer defines who you are and as an individual, and what your record should state for the public. And so, the government giveth this thing, it no longer exemplifies who you are, and the government should be required to take that away because of all the different collateral consequences that we have in there. So I know that's one of the big things that we've always heard and pushback on this, that, everyone should have this information be readily available and out there, because I need to know who I'm dealing with as an employer or anyone else. And again, I do sympathize with that. But at the end of the day, when you look at all the damage that a criminal record can do and the collateral consequences, that was definitely not what was considered when we initially started this. And now with the internet and everything else, it makes it that much worse when, yeah, you can get your record sealed, but your arrest records on, arrestrecords.com and on arrestrecords with a Z.org and .net and all these other things. And so there's a lot of different issues that come involved with that. And so again, I'm definitely empathetic to that argument. But at the end of the day, what we're doing, the benefit to the public itself by allowing individuals to get a second chance, I think overwhelmingly outweighs those concerns.
Great, thanks, Greg. So next, Bill, we'll go back to you for another question about kind of working in broad coalitions. And then we'll go to Ben David with this one too, from what you've seen in your experience with this. What would you tell people who have skepticism about broad coalitions and the, I guess, quote unquote, left-right coalitions that are coming together to work on issues like this, who may have some reservations about working with somebody who's not always been ideologically on par with what they've thought, especially in times like now? I mean, we see it's very polarized. It's very hard to have conversations a lot of times. What would you say to somebody who might bring that skepticism to a conversation?
Well, I would say that you don't have any permanent enemies, I think, and you're always looking for your friends somewhere. And I know the Justice Center and Americans for Prosperity and some of the other groups were not in agreement on a lot of other matters. But on this one, there was no degree of separation from where people wanted to get. And I think that's the important part, is to be open to the notion of having that discussion and hearing what what potentially was an adversary organization, what they need and what they want. And I think, and that can be hard work. And you have one success, that doesn't always translate to the next one. And I think you've constantly got to be talking to each other, understanding where people are coming from, what they want. And I think on the Second Chance Act, people were open to that. And people listened and talked to each other, and also believed that those folks with records really needed to be in control of what was going to happen. The decisions being made had to be made by the people closest to the problem. And I think, so I would tell people who are hesitant to do it, you ought to be open, because especially in North Carolina, it has helped. And for years, we could not move expungement bills. And with these sorts of coalitions, it's opened up doors. I mean, it's opened up doors, and no one is really is sort of compromising to a point where they feel bad, because I think you've got to talk to each other if you feel that's coming up, and that's happening. And I think that's an ongoing discussion for any sort of coalition, and it's a lot of work, but it can be really fruitful.
Absolutely. Ben, what would you say as far as the left-right coalitions that you've seen in their success? What would you say to somebody who might bring some skepticism to that?
Sure. Well, I'd say that we're at our best in the justice system when we try to take politics out of it. If you were to call 911 tonight because you were being attacked, you wouldn't ask for a Democrat or a Republican to show up. You'd ask for the police to show up. And drug dealers and child molesters don't ask their customers or kids what party they belong to either. And so what we need to be asking right now is what's the right thing? And the good news is we're not far apart at all on these issues, whether you happen to be an elected Democrat like me or an elected Republican like the DA immediately to the west of me, who happens to be my identical twin brother. What we all agree on is second chances matter for particularly nonviolent offenses. I can say that as a career murder prosecutor and someone who has unapologetically put child molesters and rapists and murderers and drug traffickers in prison for as long as possible for a long time, it is not violating my oath, it is upholding my oath to say that there are whole categories of offenses that we need mercy and forgiveness on. And when you get in a room with chiefs of police and sheriffs, to say nothing of the legislatures who are writing the laws that we're enforcing, and you get them to understand that this is about making our communities safer, not less safe. I think that whether you're talking about someone who comes at this from doing justice means loving mercy, or you're coming at it from the economic argument that was articulated earlier, we can all get around this from a policy standpoint and a moral one. And the Texas example that was given out earlier about closing prisons, we've closed 11 prisons in North Carolina and reduced bed space by 4,000 beds, that's 10%, doing what we call justice reinvestment. And we've reduced crime at the same time. And that's why many of us are involved in that movement to reduce crime and incarceration at the same time. And this Second Chances Act looks at justice on the back end. It's about re-entering society for many people and getting that scarlet letter off. And so that's not a partisan issue at all. This is one that we can all agree on.
Absolutely. Lynn, when you have seen this in your experience over your time working with different groups, what have you noticed about working with a broad coalition?
I'm just what I've realized is how people have changed since how it was 10 years ago when we first tried to get the new what I want to say, the new cases and the people. I just feel like we worked so hard to try to do it. It didn't seem like we were ever going to get there. And the fact that we are now and that people are starting to believe us and they're starting to believe ourselves that this is really happening. I just feel I'm just really so glad that I'm be part of it. And I hope that one day that I can be a lawyer that's also helping everybody with what's going on. And I really want to be part of that too. So I hope I get a chance to do that.
Yeah. Greg, why do you think there's so much momentum behind these coalitions right now?
Well, because they work. I mean, I've dealt with them at the state and federal level. You've seen success on criminal justice with that. We've talked about the ones in North Carolina. We've talked about ones in Texas. And then you saw at the federal level, in the most contentious, left and right and Democrats, Republicans cannot agree on anything. And then you see the First Step Act pass, which, was built on a lot of the state reforms that, North Carolina, Texas, Georgia, and other states did, where they looked at incentivizing individuals while they're incarcerated and then also reducing sentences. And you saw people like our Mark Holden, coming together with Van Jones, who was protesting our annual meetings outside, coming together and going on to CNN and Fox News and all these other places talking, preaching from the same book. I mean, it's incredible. And so when you see the effectiveness, I mean, of course, you're going to continue to invest and work on these things. I mean, Tyler, it's just, it makes good sense when something continues to work. Why would we do something different? And so coming together and showing this is incredibly important, particularly as we become more polarized, politically across the spectrum. So that's really it. I mean, long and short, it's effective and it works.
Yeah. Bill, we'll go next over to you. And I actually just got texted this question. Are federal crimes also covered under the Second Chances Act? And does this only apply for misdemeanors?
Federal crimes are not covered. So it's North Carolina convictions. The Second Chance Act expanded expungements for all nonviolent misdemeanors after 7 years, one misdemeanor after 5, and one nonviolent felony can be expunged. And it did open up, and Bill's a year or two earlier opened up for dismissed charges and not guilties, which were really constrained and really only allowed someone to get one of those off their record. That's been opened up a great deal by the Second Chance Act and made it automatic automated, also we'd like to see. And the other piece I will just say, which is maybe because North Carolina was one of only 2 states that prosecuted 16 and 17-year-olds as adults for years, we changed that and raised the age a year or so ago to 18 for criminal prosecution. But what you had were 16 and 17-year-olds who had misdemeanors and nonviolent felonies on their record. And the Second Chance Act opened up the opportunity for all those people to get those expunged. And so that is a tremendous benefit. It's, again, lots of people eligible, and then making that happen is the big work ahead of us. But I hope that answers it. But unfortunately for the federal crimes, there'll need to be a federal law for that.
Great. I know this one is going to be for the group at large, so we'll go around and see what everybody has to add in this. How has the Second Chance Act been beneficial for the community or North Carolina at large, and how does it benefit non-justice involved North Carolinians? So we'll start with Ben David.
Well, great question. First, I think, a lot of people are looking for good workers right now in a whole lot of spheres. And this really expands the applicant pool for who is now going to come and fix the pipes under your house or put wires in your walls. 40% of all employment in our state requires licensing. And so to be able to get that record expunged where you're now eligible for these licensing means that we're not talking about everyone going to college. We're talking now about some great trades out there that is going to be greatly expanded. We're talking about, obviously, debt relief for some folks. Bill mentioned the 16 and 17-year-olds who have been historically treated as adults until very recently. And I fought to get that law changed to expand it to 18. And what I did in my district to give life to the Second Chances Act was I wrote letters to thousands of the people who had been prosecuted in my district over the last decades and said, we're gonna dismiss these cases retrospectively because you would have never been convicted as an adult if the modern law applied. So there are things that we can do to work even with stakeholders in other parts of our communities right now as prosecutors, to hold driver's license restoration clinics, to hold expunction clinics, to really get people back to that pursuit of happiness, as we talked about earlier. And so I think there's great opportunities right now to build trust in the communities we serve and to really get people to understand that prosecutors are not here to convict at all costs. We're here to do justice. And that's what we're doing when we're giving voice to this law.
Yeah, Lynn, what have you seen? How has the Second Chance Act been beneficial to the community at large?
I think it's going to help a lot of people to go to college. A lot of people can't get into college when you have a criminal record, especially if it's a felony. It's almost impossible. And also the trades that people that, that some of them do, like for, I don't know, get barbers and stuff like that. They also have to go in there. And if they have a criminal record, it's also hard for them to be able to get that stuff. So I think that's very important as well.
Yeah, Greg, same question.
Yeah, I was going to touch on a lot of the same things that have been brought up today. I mean, the economic opportunity for those that come around, just not the individuals that get relief for criminal records. So many jobs now require an occupational license. That's something that we've been working on for sure. But it's just having that record and what that does to you and your prospects and for other things, for housing, for anything else. I mean, when you look at employment and housing, those are the two biggest indicators if someone's going to be successful once they remove themselves from the criminal justice system. So when you put this barrier to relief that this criminal record entails, when it's incredibly unnecessary. Obviously, we want to know when certain individuals have certain criminal records, and that's good for the public order. But for many of the ones that we've been talking about, it just makes good sense to allow people to have those opportunities. Like Lynn talked about, I could be a doctor, I could be a lawyer, I could at least have those opportunities when you just have this barrier that continually just, takes you away and puts you in a different sector of society. It's obviously going to be beneficial, and those individuals can fulfill their dreams and fulfill their potentials in the American dream, just like everyone else can. And so it really is a win-win, and for the reason that have already been discussed here.
Yeah. Bill, anything to add on that?
Why, not a lot. I think everybody covered it pretty well. I mean, I think the one thing I would say is that anytime you can give people hope and where you have taken it away and in such a fundamental way, that's a good thing. And it's for all the economic reasons and for them being productive and for the society and the community functioning better. All of those things are really important. But I think we just spend too much on the criminal justice system these days. And I think hopefully we start turning a corner where we start investing in people. And I think Ben David has talked about that. There's giving people the opportunity, but then there needs to be those other investments in communities for housing and jobs and just making things better for the group. And anytime we're all talking about that, I think that's a good thing. So quite often it's an us versus them debate, and this one's more about how we all rise and fall together, really, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think this was a great conversation tonight, and I think this is a good place for us to wrap. But I'd like to go to Lynn for any last thoughts that she might have on the documentary, the process that's gone along these last couple of years. Close us out, Lynn, with some parting thoughts.
It was a little hard for me to do it. I know it sounds stupid, but it was hard for me. I had to relive a lot of stuff that I didn't want to deal with anymore, but it really did help me a lot. And I know how important it was. So I'd win anyway. But I hope that there's a lot of people, that they'll see this and they'll be able to understand that, hey, that maybe that could be me, maybe I could do that. And it's so important for them to try. Just like you said, it's so important for them to try. It's so important for them to see that people can be somebody. And talking about hope, how important that is to know that one day that what you're going through right now and struggling, trying to get a job and trying to take care of your family, that one day, that'll be over. You know what I mean? That'll be something that that one day it's not going to be that way. And it gives you hope. And that's something that's just so important that people don't even understand it. I never thought that I would be able to get to this point in my life. It's still hard for me to believe it. But I'm glad that it is happening. And I'm glad that there's going to be many people, hopefully, that won't be so as old as me. And they'll be able to enjoy their life a little bit better when they get older. But I just really appreciate everything that y'all have done for me and hopefully for a lot of people in the future. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, we appreciate you, Lynn. Like we talked about before, it was a pleasure working with you and everybody else on the coalition. And I thank you guys. Thank all the panelists today for joining us. It was a really great discussion. And for everybody watching online, thank you for tuning in and joining us tonight.
Thank you.